Hey, sorry about the last broadcast attempt. I couldn't hear anything, so I had to find headphones. Everyone,
It's all good. Yeah, we seem to have some type of technical issue every time.
we're all set to go.
Yeah, we are all set to go.
So I'm Tyler Coachman. I'm a fellow EMU student, friends with Alex, and he's invited me here to talk to you guys about Ukraine and because he thinks I'm better informed than he is. I guess.
Yeah. So basically, I'm a little confused about what is going on with Ukraine.
Mhm.
And you seem to be very educated on the subject. So, without giving like your personal beliefs or anything,
Mhm.
what exactly is going on here?
So I'm not an expert. I just want to say
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
just read the news. My best area of interest and knowledge on Ukraine and Russia are their politics and political systems, and especially Russia's pre-Putin, post-Soviet era, so the Yeltsin area of politics. I'm very well versed on.
Hmm.
Weird, weird thing to really know a lot about, but I do. Anyway, so in Ukraine, so Putin, as we know, or if you didn't know, Vladimir Putin, longtime president of Russia, I'd call him a dictator, or at least a strongman, has invaded Ukraine, a bordering nation that has friendly ties to the United States, but former Soviet state that has had a long, tenuous relationship with during the Putin era with Russia. There's a lot you can unpack there. So his motives are not completely clear, but like why he decided to do it and why now.
Hmm.
But his objective would appear to either be take control and possibly annex large portions of Ukraine, or alternatively dismantle the current government of Ukraine and install a puppet government. So take over all of Ukraine and install a Russia allied puppet government,
Interesting.
which both would be that puppet government would have the extreme challenge of having a public that wouldn't accept it, but doesn't mean Putin wouldn't try.
I see. And what does Putin hope to gain out of invading Ukraine?
Again, it's not completely clear why he's doing it, but he has long kind of viewed Ukraine. His the view he's espoused. It's not clear whether he believes it or it's a story he's telling to sell other people. Is
Mm.
that Ukraine is rightfully Russian, and that he told a whole story that it was the Soviet Union that came up with the fiction that Ukraine is its own independent country
Gotcha.
area and with its own culture, but it never was. He basically his goal for life has been to undo the humiliation and loss of power for that took place after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And so annexing or taking control of Ukraine would be part of that.
Okay. Now, and is that statement that he made not true? Like,
And Ukraine has its own history and own culture. It's very intertwined and overlapping at times with Russia. They have strong ties, but I mean, as do many countries, and Hungary have intertwined histories, and at one point were their own nations. But Austrians and Hungarians have their own culture, for instance. Each are
okay,
They're separate cultures, separate countries, separate histories that are just intertwined.
I see.
Or Austria and Germany, same thing, strong intertwined cultures, but not the same country and not the same culture overall.
Okay.
So I've
Now,
likened it to that.
Biden has Biden and the NATO allies have imposed quite a bit of sanctions
Yeah.
on Russia. Do you think this is a good strategy?
I mean, it's necessary. I mean, you can't leave to have some sort of response, and sanctions are one of many ways to respond. The first, it's a good first step. The sanctions that have been issued, there need to be more, and there are going to be more, and there's some more drastic measures that could be taken. One measure that's been talked about, I can't remember. Let me double check what it is. There's a talk that one of the nuclear options. Oh yeah, so the SWIFT, which is to SWIFT, so to cut Russia out of the SWIFT bank messaging system to punish them is a drastic method. One
So,
Another one would be to drastic. They've talked about possibly. Rumor has it that the Pentagon has given Biden plans to just consider as an option that would see the U.S. undertaking cyber attacks on Russia, major cyber attacks to disrupt their infrastructure, but the objective would not be to impact civilians, but rather to disrupt military operations near the border.
Gotcha.
I think that's a bad idea for the one reason that our infrastructure is incredibly vulnerable to cyber attacks, and we've so far have been spared of a Russian cyber attack. We open a major can of worms of retaliation if we launch one on Russia. It doesn't matter that we're not going after civilians. They won't. Putin's not a man for nuance. He'll spin his own story and say it's the same thing, and
I agree with that. Yeah.
he'll disrupt our power grid if we do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Biden. I think Biden might not consider it. Even it's just an option. They're like, here if you want it. I pray to God he's not actually going to do it.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you next, actually, because he doesn't seem too hesitant about it. But to me personally, I don't think it's drastic enough. And you actually covered on that because Putin is still interested in going through with this plan.
Mm-hmm.
And he already knows that there's going to be sanctions, and he does it anyway. And to me, that's really scary. To me, it makes me think that he thinks that we're weak, you know?
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, Putin's it's brinksmanship, what Putin's practicing right now. He knows that we don't want a full-on war. No one wants a full-on war against Russia at the moment. That's where they would like to avoid it. So he's hoping that there's very few other options that will. People think that. I don't know how much you know about Putin's network of wealth. The government might know a lot. They might not know much. I don't know what they know behind closed doors, but a lot of people say to get to Putin, you have to go after his wealth because that's what he cares most about. Putin has accumulated. I mean, he's arguably the richest man on earth for speculation. All remarkably on a president's salary of a few $100,000 a year and having been a career civil servant without family money.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing corrupt there.
Well, he's done that he's become rich by taking advantage of his own people.
A large part is some people think he gets kickbacks from the oligarchs that if they want to retain their wealth, they give Putin half of their wealth.
Okay.
That's one theory of how he's made his wealth.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, it's at the expense of Russian people.
Now, what do you make of Putin's threat? Because I know he said some pretty interesting stuff when it came to talking about retaliation from our allies. He said that we would face the most consequences that we ever had. What do you think about that? Like, what does that say about him?
I don't know if Putin's going to actually attack or go after. I mean, he's the U.S. or any allies. I don't know if he's going to cross that line or not.
Okay.
That might be a line that he's not willing to cross, and he might just be talking bluster. But
right. Well, I mean,
there's talks of he might attack us with a cyber attack. In which case, we're all good to go with retaliating. I don't think we should have a first strike on Russia, but if they attack our infrastructure using cyber attacks, of course, we're all good to do that to them.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm going to have to ask a tough question here, and I'm asking this because this has been in the news a lot. Do you think this is the unofficial start of World War III?
I don't think it's going to be World War III. Or I don't think it'll ever be. The history books would call it a World War III. I actually don't know if we're ever going to have World War III due to the nuclear deterrent. There's not going to be, and if there is a World War III, it's never going to look anything like World War I or World War II. Again, nuclear deterrent.
Okay. But why do you think this won't escalate dramatically? Because it already has.
I just don't think it would be anything called a world that would just be known as a world war. I mean, that's a high bar for a battle, and if anything, it would resemble the first Gulf War, except a much more powerful aggressor.
Well, I guess I guess the argument against that is that, like, if Russia is able to succeed with Ukraine, that will encourage China to succeed over Taiwan.
And which
And
and also Russia would probably go after some other bordering states.
yeah, so and obviously Taiwan is one of our allies, so they would have declared war on us if that happens.
Taiwan, we
So
actually don't have a weird relationship with Taiwan. Taiwan, I don't know if we, I think we actually don't have official diplomatic ties with them due to our one China policy. But nonetheless, they are a Western power that we have an invested interest in keeping. They're an independent democracy. China views them as a rogue breakaway state. Many people view them as an independent nation.
okay.
But if you go to China, like all the maps of China include Taiwan.
So Biden said as of now
I would say, by the way, and I consider Taiwan to be in the defense state, just so you know. But I'm saying China would argue otherwise,
right,
unfortunately.
right, exactly, yeah. But Biden said as of now he will not put troops into Ukraine to fight Russia. Do you think that's a good call, and do you think that will change in the future?
I don't know whether it'll change. The issue, I would ideally want that troops to be at least considered on the table.
Hmm.
Um, Again, like I mean, the only difference here is the deference to Russia being a much more powerful military. But this is the same exact thing as the first Gulf War, and we were all ready to go when that happened.
Mhm. Right.
This, although to be fair, the first Gulf War we were probably more motivated by the fear that Iraq, first of all, that Iraq had already taken control of Kuwait's oil, and then they would probably go further on to Saudi Arabia's oil fields. So it's
Gotcha.
probably more vested in money than sovereignty of nations, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
I mean, if we're the argument of sovereignty of nations being violated, it's the same exact thing.
I see. That makes sense.
But the other issue is number one. I mean, starting a war with Russia is
Right.
uh, that's a big thing. The other thing is the state of America right now, and its disunity is just not primed for for a rally to for a war. I mean,
I fully agree.
we would be they'd have such weakened support. I mean, anything Biden would do would be there's a large camp of the Republican Party that would oppose it, just for the sake of opposing what Biden does.
Hmm.
And then there, of course, are people who would oppose it on principle, on whatever principles they hold, whether they are anti-war, period, whether they are isolationist leaning, or whatever perspective they hold against involving us in that, or whether they fear a war with Russia is by taking too large a bite.
Gotcha.
So you'd have two camps of large opposition. So it'd be really, I mean, probably the last stretch of the Vietnam War would probably be how unpopular it would be.
Right. Because that was the first time that, like, the tragedies of war got exposed. Right.
Well, I mean, it was a long running war that had foggy justification that turned out to be incorrect, and
Hmm.
it, it wasn't a great rationale, anyways. And that's why people didn't like the Vietnam War, amongst other things. Uh, it was drawn out. There was very little prospect of turning the leaf on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I fully agree with that. I mean, America, America's military now isn't even close to America's military at the end of World War II. I think you can agree that we make pretty bad decisions when it comes to our military.
I
And
think
we've had
we
the past few
have
years.
tremendous spending, but we don't manage it well. We
Yes.
spend money on planes that are obsolete, equipment that's obsolete,
Well,
because
well,
a
what
certain
I'm, yeah, well, what,
because a certain congressman perhaps has a manufacturing plant in their district and included an earmark for continuing to manufacture obsolete technology. We
mhm.
spend trillions developing planes that don't work, and then we'll put more money in there, hoping maybe it'll work now. So yeah, no, we spend terribly.
Well, yeah, and what I'm talking about is
You're
like,
talking more strategic decisions.
yeah, strategic, exactly. Yeah, I
I
mean,
I'm not a military strategy expert, so I don't want to criticize those that are leading our military. I think we have some brilliant minds in our military. I think that we've gotten ourselves into battles that didn't have clear objectives or clear paths towards victories, and we've put a lot of the and as a result, military kind of has had no prospect of success in those battles.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, no, I mean, there have also been some very bad calls on the military. But I mean, our military also is incredibly effective. I mean, Iraq, for instance, we did toppling Saddam. We did that record pace. But
Right. Yeah.
the issue there was we didn't have a plan for exiting Iraq, the Iraq that we now took away the existing strongman government of.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any plan for dealing with dissident forces that have now kind of been awoken.
Well, I mean, one thing I'm really concerned about is how eager today's leaders all over the world are for war. I mean, I think both sides of the party can agree. Like, I'm a Democrat, I'm Republican, you're Democrat. Like, we can both agree that this was unprovoked and it was completely
of Russia. Yeah, Russia's actions were unprovoked. Yeah,
and it should be punished.
I would like to say that both sides can agree. Unfortunately, there is a sect of the Republican Party. I mean, Tucker Carlson, who's a very influential host of Fox News and has a large ear amongst Republicans, has kind of been spreading the message that Putin's justified, as has former Democratic Congresswoman, who I would argue she's no Democrat anymore or ever was, Tulsi Gabbard. She's a fake Democrat and has become a Republican. She's also doing the same thing on Tucker's show.
What do you mean a fake Democrat?
She pretended she had turned a leaf on LGBTQ rights, and she was insincere in the end. She was doing it for political gain. And Tulsi Gabbard has a strong history of supporting strongmen and Assad and other individuals around the world, and defending them. I would say I suspect Tulsi Gabbard hates Muslims. Perhaps isn't Hindu nationalist, is what some people have speculated. She's done a lot of troubling things towards Muslim population. Her stances towards Muslim populations around the world.
What has she done?
So she's the president. She's defended really embraced the current prime minister of India, and defended him against accusations that he had, in his previous governorship, allowed a genocide. And amongst other things, has really troubling history when it comes to Muslims around the world. And a lot of the wars she does support are wars where we're bombing Muslims. Whereas any war, so I mean, she's taken problematic stances about the rights and protection of our obligation to protect populations that are Muslim around the world.
Well, that's certainly very dark.
There's other factors. Again, I suspect she is. I don't know her heart. I don't know her soul. And I'm not going to outright say she is.
Sure. I had another question in mind, but I sort of forgot it.
So, do you want to know a little bit about Russian-Ukrainian history relations during Putin's regime?
Yeah.
So, actually, I'll go a little bit further. I'll start with Yeltsin. So, Ukraine, during the dissolution of the Soviet Union, held a referendum where 90-something% voted for independence from the Soviet Union. So, becoming an independent state, Ukraine had the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world, as well as many of the Soviet means of production were situated in the Ukrainian borders.
Gotcha.
They voluntarily surrendered their nukes. And I think it was the Budapest Memorandum, in which Russia has violated their assurances that they would respect their sovereignty and their borders. US, UK, Russia, and I think France maybe, or maybe one other state, gave those assurances. They weren't guarantees, but they were assurances. So when people say we somehow broke a promise to Russia about NATO, we never gave any formal promise to Russia that we wouldn't situate troops in Ukraine or anywhere. What Russia's thinking about is an offhanded remark by, I think, a foreign minister of Germany about the placement of troops going forward. That was not a binding agreement, not even a formal promise, and was not speaking on behalf of NATO or the United States. So there's nothing.
Gotcha.
But I've heard Tulsi Gabbard and others say we had violated some promise about NATO. That's a bull crap story. But anyways, so they voluntarily gave up their nukes, received those assurances. It's honestly a miracle that many of the post-Soviet states, other than Russia, I think all of them, gave up the nukes they possessed. There's a large fear that one of the governments would not have a good grasp on either have a failing government or not secure their nukes, and it would wind up in the hands of terrorists or rogue states.
Is the reason of that due to the sheer amount of nukes that Russia has? Because even during the height of the Cold War, like they had double the amount of our nukes.
They gave it up. I mean, it was a win for those who are against nuclear proliferation, pretty much. That was why people wanted them to give up their nukes, and also the worry that some of the post-Soviet states might wind up having their nukes get into the hands of terrorists or rogue nations.
The real Cynthia says the media is covering real reason Putin is doing.
I'm curious, could you comment what you feel is Putin's real rationale?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
And are they covering as in they're covering it as in they're giving it coverage, or they're covering it up as in not reporting it? Oh yeah, no, Putin's coming up with spinning a story that he's equated Ukraine to Nazis, accused them of genocide. There's no truth to that. I kind of find it gross that he's accusing a Jewish prime minister or Jewish president of being a Nazi for no actual reason. But and he's equated them to Nazis, amongst other stories he's told. But they gave up their nukes. So Putin, during the Putin era, so 2004, a few years into Putin's presidency, became acting president on New Year's 2000. 3 months later was elected officially president. So this would have been 4 years into Putin's presidency, roughly.
Okay.
Ukraine held a presidential election. They have what's called a 2-round election system, in which if no candidate gets the majority in the first round, they hold a runoff between the top 2 candidates.
Gotcha.
So they had a runoff. There were 2 candidates in that election. One was kind of very cozy towards. Hold on, I just turned off my camera. One was very cozy. Sorry, Cam. There we go. One was very cozy towards Russia. One was more friendly towards the West. So the big event that happened there were 2 major events that happened in that election. Number one, the pro-Western candidate. His name was. Hold on, I'm going to double check what his name was. It was Lukashenko. He started falling really ill and he was hospitalized. It turned out he had been poisoned by a very potent diotoxin, the most potent diotoxin. So there was an assassination attempt on him. Like he had scarring from it. But and then the election itself was fraudulent, according to international observers, the runoff. And ultimately the courts decided it was fraudulent. Yanukovych, who was the pro-Russian candidate, won the first runoff, and it was declared fraudulent due to evidence it was fraudulent. So they had a rematch, and Lukashenko won it. 4 years later, Lukashenko's up for re-election. Yanukovych runs again. Lukashenko places third, so he doesn't make the runoff. Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko is his opponent. She's also pro-Western. Yanukovych wins, and the observers and the courts and everyone declares, no one challenges it pretty much. Everyone's like, yeah, this was actually a legitimate win. There was no fraud. His presidency, there were a number of factors that led to sort of a revolution against him. One of them was his action against even considering membership in NATO, despite popular support for it. And deep corruption. He jailed Yulia Tymoshenko, his presidential opponent in the election, on false charges. So again, he's Putin allied. He flees to Russia and then is removed from office. He was later found in absentia, guilty of high treason. So they hold a new presidential election for his replacement. Poroshenko, who is pro-Western, wins by a pretty large margin, doesn't need a runoff. He had some problems as president. He wasn't really great, probably corrupt. 2019, Zelensky, the current president, who was previously an actor who played the president on a sitcom, won the election. I thought it was remarkable in that, first off, maybe Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who played a president on the comedy Veep, could run for U.S. president. Kidding, but what was really remarkable was that Poroshenko, peaceful transfer of power between Zelensky and Poroshenko, I thought was pretty great, and signaled a healthy democracy in Ukraine.
Wow.
The fact that the election there was not really fraud. Zelensky has taken a number of actions that might be backsliding in their democracy, but Ukraine's a democracy still. Russia isn't. But in 2014, during Poroshenko's presidency, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea illegally. Crimea was a part of Ukraine that had a large Russian population of Russian national heritage, ethnicity, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that goes a lot deeper than most of the news is saying.
What's worth mentioning also, so not Yanukovych, it was who was the president who was removed from Yanukovych. His chief advisor, among his chief advisors, was Paul Manafort, who was also the second manager of Trump's presidential campaign and would later go to prison for illegally acting as a foreign agent without declaring himself one and receiving illegal gifts. He worked with Roger Stone, and what they call the dictators lobby. So they worked for dictators and regimes around the world. And
you're saying they're in support of them?
No, it's just an interesting tie that Yanukovych, Trump's campaign manager, it just amongst the reasons why Manafort brought up red flags was that he lobbied for people with deep Kremlin ties in Ukraine or Ukrainian allies of the Kremlin.
Gotcha.
Also, I didn't note in the political history, Trump's first impeachment was caused by him threatening not to supply congressional passed aid, military aid to Ukraine, unless Ukraine would declare that they were investigating Biden's and his son. Biden
is way too far gone to handle this.
I think you're probably commenting, I guess, casting doubts on his mental stability or his. Is that what you're commenting on? Or are you talking politically far gone?
I kind of agree with this.
My view, I don't know whether Biden has mental decline or not, but I think he's not an insane individual. He's mostly there and rational, and the thing is, he listens to advice. That's the key thing for presidents.
Well, I agree with that, but I really don't think he's good enough to stand up to Putin. And the reason I say that is because he said he was able to, he was going to do all those things to Russia, and Putin basically just laughed in our face and did it anyway. And that tells me that he's not very threatened.
Well, some people have speculated that Putin might be far gone, and that's his reason for invading. If you saw his meeting with the Security Council, it was a very bizarre meeting, largely staged.
I'm sorry, Cynthia, are you talking about his physical state?
I think it's or mental.
Okay.
I think it's
yeah.
I think Biden's mostly there. I think he might have. I don't know.
Well, Tyler, me and you were talking about this at lunch.
Yeah, before.
I think there should be a maximum age limit on a presidency, and
I don't know whether it should be law, but I agree that I thought Biden was too old to run for president. I thought Bernie and I thought I thought Bloomberg were all too old to run for president, and I thought Elizabeth Warren at 2020. I might change my mind, but I thought it was her last year to run for president, and that she would be too old in 2024 to run for her first term.
Trump kept the peace. I disagree with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the notion that Trump was a peacekeeper is wrong. Provoked a lot of actual tensions with number of actions he took that were, whether it was, again, the Iranian head of the military, terrible guy, but the attack that killed him kind of really heightened tensions and could have been disastrous.
No, I have a question. There are a few people in Congress on both sides of the
party. Iran. Did I say Iran when I
don't know.
But an Iranian military, yeah.
But when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who want to engage and they think they're going to win. why do you think they think that?
I think we
Because
would beat Russia in a military battle.
I don't think we would.
Oh, no, is that what they think? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I think they think that, but I think they're extremely inaccurate with that.
Again, I don't know. I think it would be a very tough war.
Well, I mean, like the Russia is stronger than the Taliban, much stronger,
Yeah.
and we lost to the Taliban.
Although that would also different styles of war and different regions, and also the difficulty that and
What I'm
difficulty
saying,
of dealing with disunified local populations,
okay,
whereas
but what I'm
Ukraine has a
saying
pretty unified
is,
national country. Like
well,
they would welcome intervention more so than Afghanistan, where they were mixed.
all I'm saying is that I think the policies are going to stay the same, and it's not going to go over well here. That's my theory.
And also, I mean, we did beat the Taliban. The issue is we didn't have an exit plan to keep them out. But I mean, we didn't beat them, but we warded them off pretty much. They were out of power for the most part. But
Until
again,
we
like
left.
until we left, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Final question here. So there is supposed to be some sort of financial damage
To the
because
U.S. or to Russia.
to both.
So my thought is one of the things I'm curious is how the private sector acts. Are U.S. corporations and other international corporations going to divest from Russia and punish Russia?
Well,
Like,
I'm
for instance,
particularly
Universal Studios, are they going to continue building Universal Studios Moscow, or are they going to cancel that project?
what I'm particularly concerned about is particularly the oil prices
Yeah.
because
Oh
Russia.
no, that's what I told you yesterday. Is that oil is going to take a hit, the oil trade internationally.
Yeah. Do, do you think now would be a good time to introduce fracking?
I mean, fracking is introduced. We do have fracking.
Well, yeah, but do you think we should increase it now?
Amp it. I mean, I don't know.
Because with because like with Russia tensions so high, like gas prices are just soaring. I think it is a good time to begin becoming energy independent.
I mean, we currently are. I think last I checked, we were still energy independent. We had become, I think, under Obama, energy independent.
Last time I checked, we weren't.
I think we were a net exporter of oil,
Hmm.
largely due to fracking. That the fracking that did take place, the shale oil that we were able to extract, I think,
How,
increased U.S. production.
how much oil do we have?
I'm not an expert in oil.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I mean, we have a lot of oil, but a lot of it is also in areas we might not want to disrupt.
All right.
But I mean, and it's weird. Some of the oil we do extract. Did you know that Los Angeles is on top of oil, and there are actually oil wells hidden all over Los Angeles?
I did not know that.
A lot of them are disguised. Yeah, oil derricks. I think is it Oklahoma's state capital, Tulsa. I think Tulsa is the state capital of Oklahoma, right?
I don't know.
But anyways, where I think it's Oklahoma State Capitol literally has an oil derrick in front of it too. That's also they couldn't have kind of kept it classy and not put an oil derrick in that. But
All right. Well, that's pretty much all the questions I had for you.
So do you want to talk about sort of how countries have reacted to it?
Perhaps, yeah.
So I mean, Germany is canceling we're putting on hold the pipeline from Russia that would have carried oil, which I mean, as one of the things, there's all the sanctions. I watched a little bit of Boris Johnson's speech, and Theresa May, former prime minister, who's a backbencher now in UK Parliament, also gave remarks immediately after him. Honestly, my view is, as much as I hate Boris, I would let Boris Johnson be prime minister for several more terms and get glory, recover his image for if it leads to a peaceful result in Ukraine. I wouldn't care if he got credit in Britain.
So you think Boris is doing a good job with his
I
policies?
don't know. No, I was saying that I wouldn't mind if there's a peace. Like again, like I don't care
So
who
you're
gets
saying,
the credit. I just want Ukraine to
yeah.
have a peaceful resolution. So
So you're saying like give him a chance, right? Like we'll see.
no, what
how
I'm
he
saying is
does.
I'm not saying give anything about his policies. I'm saying that if Ukraine has a peaceful resolution, whether right or wrong, I don't care who gets the credit.
Gotcha.
He could take all the credit, I don't care. I just want a peaceful resolution, which I don't know. The unlikelihood that there could. there's also the concern that Russia is going to use cryptocurrency to get around sanctions, possibly.
How so?
I'm not a complete expert, but but that, I mean, cryptocurrency is kind of hard. A lot of them are harder to track and to enforce, and they're also not as well regulated by governments because they're new. But like the new developments in Ukraine, I think there was did you hear that Chernobyl is now controlled by the Russians?
I did hear that, yeah. Which I think, unless without protective gear, is a pretty dangerous health concern.
Oh, yeah, it's a very dangerous place to send troops.
Yeah. What are they trying to gain from that?
Just take over the Ukrainian land.
Okay, but
and it's an important kind of pathway to get to other cities.
But they know that Chernobyl's a nuclear waste.
They don't care. Right? It's a good pathway to move troops.
Okay.
And also, I don't think Putin really gives two shits whether his troops die of cancer 20 years from now.
That's true. He is very impersonal.
Yeah. I don't think he would care if they some of them started suffering radiation poisoning tomorrow.
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah, no, there's I'm looking at some of the stories I bookmarked. Said Russia claims to have attacked. I think we're taking control of 70. Let's see, they say they've destroyed 70 targets earlier today.
Well, I know 40 people have died.
Yeah, at least that's the official count given, confirmed by the Ukrainian military.
Yeah, probably higher. Yeah.
Yeah. There's concerns about Belarusian independence. I mean, Belarus is currently a dictatorship that is allied with Putin, so I don't know if that. Their last election was clearly fraudulent. The opposition leader is believed to have won, but the election results said the incumbent won something like 80% of the vote. There's concerns about Moldova and other countries, I think.
Gotcha.
But there's also one of the interesting things is there's not, at least in the cities, which again, Russian cities might not represent the overall Russian population. They might be the liberal bubbles of Russia, as liberal as Russia gets, I guess. But I'm going to go plug in my computer. But there's large protests, despite the fact that protesting will end you up in jail.
Well, Russia, yeah.
So there's a lot of Russians who are against this. As much as they celebrated taking over Crimea, polls show that, I mean, Russians don't want even the small territories that have separatist movements in Ukraine.
Well, yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, most reasonable people do not want to invade a country, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of want to mind their own business. But unfortunately, most of our world leaders are not very reasonable.
But I mean, Putin is incredibly popular in Russia due to his partially due to his cult of personality, partially due to propaganda.
I don't think he's truly popular. I just think
he actually is very popular amongst Russians. Even some Russians live abroad love him. But
probably not after this, right?
Again, I was going to comment. I don't know how it's going to impact his image. Yeah. But he's cultivated a very popular image in Russia through propaganda and also through popular acts, taking credit for actions, and also constantly taking credit for the positive growth in Russia's economy following the difficult Yeltsin years.
All right. Well, Tyler, thanks very much for coming on. Do you have anything in general to add?
So I just have a few other stories, but I'm nothing super important. But I'm looking at a few other stories.
Yeah. Well, I think we did a good job covering the main points. So I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
And prayers for Ukraine.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Ukraine, we stand with you and pray for you.
Absolutely.
Pray for you.
Yeah. I can't imagine being in that situation.
Yeah. Also, one thing, I think Ukraine is actually taking donations to fund their military. So if anyone wants to finance, I mean,
I don't know. Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe?
I don't know if it's a GoFundMe, but Ukraine donations military.
I'll put the link in the description.
Ukraine is crowdfunding. Let me see where you can crowdfund. The Bank of Ukraine. Let's see. Let me see if there's a link, anything there. Oh, so there's a account you can transfer money to. There's an account number.
Hmm.
I'm going to post the official article from the Ukrainian government, so you don't think I'm trying to wire you to my bank account.
Yeah.
If you wanted to give money to Ukraine, you could. Is that others can see that, right? Oh no, it's private chat, right?
Private.
Here's the comments. I'm going to put in the comments.
Okay.
Can I put in the comments?
I think so. Can you see the comments? If you can see the comments, you can put one in.
Let's see.
Hold on. Let me copy and I'll.
Yeah, you can put it. I think I'm not host, so that's why.
Yeah. I'm the host.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler. Thank you so much. That definitely cleared a lot of things up.
Yeah. There's also worries about Russia possibly pillaging museums and other of their antiquities and other. I mean, that's less important than independence and sovereignty, but I mean, robbing a nation of its. I mean, we're in the West. I mean, that's the entire British Museum, arguably pillaging the other countries, but so.
All right.
I mean, it's still. I mean, it's a crime then, and it's a crime